policy that's linked with social services and the local health board to ensure that there's a joined up approach in relation to provision and transition for learners with additional learning needs from 0 to 25. Further work is planned for developing additional opportunities for the post-16 population, and we will be publishing an additional guidance document in relation to that element as soon as that's available. If you go on to the theme of capacity, so prior to the pandemic, a restructure was agreed for the team in response to the changing needs of the service. The restructure progressed during the pandemic and new appointments were made, and it's been since reviewed and further adjustments have been made in relation to that restructure in response to the changing guidance from Welsh Government, as well as appraisal of the demand of the service. The ALN caseworker team was introduced as part of the initial restructure, and largely these posts have been successful in improving communication and reducing and resolving legal challenge. There's been the successful appointment of the early years ALN lead officer, we mentioned previously, who leads on the preschool statutory process. In response to Welsh Government guidance that was produced following the initial restructure, new posts of designated coordinators were created with a view that these would lead on the statutory function of developing local authority maintained individual development plans. Those IDPs are to replace the statement of SEN, and it does it's not a like-for-like replacement. The IDP also includes those pupils who would have previously, their needs would have been met at School Action or School Action Plus possibly. So it's a wider remit. So it can cover up to 25–26% of the population that will be requiring an IDP under this legislation framework. Legal resource has been included within the restructure, which has enabled the team to have dedicated support to advise on any disputes and appeals that may come to light. And this, alongside other changes and introduction of the ALN caseworker team, for instance, there's been a considerable reduction in the tribunals and appeals that the local authority have received. So, for instance, in 2016-17, there was 29 tribunal appeals to the SEN Tribunal of Wales. In the year 2021, there were 7 in total, with 5 of which were withdrawn by the parent and 2 were resolved outside of tribunal. So it's a much more collaborative approach to development of provision with parents. We've received no tribunals in this year to date. And I think that, you know, there is much more of a focus on working in partnership and collaboration with families to jointly agree the best provision for learners. So there's been significant work for planning and preparation for the implementation, and it's continued, but it has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Regardless of this, a comprehensive training package continues to be offered to schools, early year settings and FEIs. Attendance at these trainings has been excellent, and the change actually in the way that we deliver training as a response to COVID, so that's now predominantly through Teams and online, that has enabled much more capacity to meet the demands, and we've been able to reach much more professionals to provide that training opportunity. for all education settings that we support. The training menu is developed much in response to what schools are telling us they need. So we ask schools to complete a readiness survey annually to outline where they feel they are in preparedness for the ALN reform and where they feel they need additional support, and therefore the training menu is developed in response to that feedback. Alongside the training menu, significant resources have been developed and shared on the SharePoint site to ensure that schools are supported, that they have the tools that they need in order to undertake their new statutory functions as part of this new legislation, and that all of the resources have been quality assured and signed off by legal, so that they are in line with the legislation, and these are shared on the SharePoint site as well. A principles document has been developed and consulted on with schools, and this sets out the principles of which Swansea Local Authority and schools will work together to meet the needs of learners. Schools have requested that the delegated budget is maximised, and in response will meet the needs of all learners within their schools that are identified as having ALN. The local authority will develop IDPs for looked after children that have ALN, but the provision will be made from the school's delegated budget. It's been agreed that the local authority will maintain the IDPs of all learners who have access to specialist placements and preschool learners. Further work is needed on the area of post-16. We are awaiting further guidance and clarification from Welsh Government on the implementation of the Act for this age range. There has already been significant work undertaken. We've met with the external funding team, for instance, pupil support, school improvement and social services, to begin to develop a strategy for post-16 provision across Swansea. And that as a whole, but obviously will include ALN learners as part of that wider offer. We've also worked closely with Gower College to enable learners to access an internship with teams within Swansea Council to greater increase their employability opportunities. We move on to provision. Additional placements have been created at Pennerbryn Special School to increase provision for learners with significant need across the local authority. There's a project in progress to review specialist teaching facility placements to ensure that the specialist teaching facilities are meeting the wider demand across Swansea for specialist placement, and workshops with stakeholder representation is in place with the aim of strengthening this provision going forward. There's been successful grant-funded social communication champion project undertaken with all schools. This has very much been with an aim to improve the universal learning provision offer and targeted provision that's available to pupils within the mainstream setting. The aim of this project was to train a social communication champion in every school in Swansea who will have the skills and expertise to support their colleagues in meeting the needs of learners with social communication difficulties and who may or may not have an ASD diagnosis. We undertook a pilot provision in Birchgrove Comprehensive School to address the need for additional provision for learners with social, emotional, behavioural difficulties that had ALN. This pilot was extremely successful, and met the individualised needs of learners with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, and we have secured this now as a permanent provision within Swansea. Principles for a new funding formula have been agreed with head teachers, but further work is required on securing the agreement in detail of the funding formula, although agreement has been secured that the formula will be phased over a 5-year period to enable that transition into the new funding agreement. Swansea Teachers of the Deaf have been instrumental in working with Welsh Government to develop the new curriculum for British Sign Language. Swansea have further committed to this area of work by funding a project to develop training packages and resources for schools to roll out the BSL curriculum. We've also provided funding for school staff to access BSL accreditation according to their current abilities to further expand the expertise of BSL across the local authority, thus enabling an increased offer of BSL support for learners. We continue to work with the local health board to agree roles and responsibilities and seek solutions to the different degrees of readiness in our organisations. Move on to quality. The team, in collaboration with Elenco cluster leads and key stakeholders, have developed guidance materials and documentation to support the transformation. These have been co-produced with a parent carer forum, legal and other key stakeholders to ensure that they are accessible and in line with legislation. ALN cluster leads regularly meet with our team staff, and they work on key themes of development, information sharing and training for colleagues to ensure that the expertise is developed in each cluster, and that will provide support to colleagues within that cluster. Moderation of the new statutory documentation of IDPs is taking place in order to ensure that there's a consistency of approach across the local authority. Good quality governor training is being provided on the ALNET Act to ensure governing bodies are aware of the Act and its implications for schools. School improvement advisors have been trained to support monitoring of ALM provision on their visit. It has been agreed that this will be included in all school visits. There are greater links between the ALN IT and the school improvement team, and the school profiler identifies where there are schools of concern for ALN provision, as well as to celebrate the excellent practice within our schools. The huge amount of training that's been provided to schools, and processes have been refined and improved for both the SEN system to improve efficiency, whilst also developing new processes for the new ALN system. All pupil paper files have been digitised so that they are now accessible online. This has been a fundamental change in the way that we work as a team, has enabled staff to work from home during the pandemic. A digital tool has been developed to meet the needs of staff across Swansea. This will support the statutory process that are required at both the school and the local authority level, and will enable the local authority to better monitor provision across the whole of Swansea. And this will be accessible for professionals who work for the full range of 0 to 25. Partnership. The number of collaborative groups meet regularly, including the ALN Strategic Board, ALN Crossfairs Head Teacher Group. We've got a dispute resolution service has been commissioned through SNAP to enable an independent space for disputes to be resolved. This has been used a few times over the past few years, and it's enabled a resolution between parents and the local authority where otherwise it may have resulted in an SEN Tribunal for Wales appeal. Links have been developed with mental health services via the Emotional Health Psychological Wellbeing Group, with representation from Education Psychology, Wellbeing, Third Sector, Youth Service and CAMS. Swansea Council website for ALN is being reviewed and significantly developed to improve access to information for all. The new legislation places greater responsibility on local health boards to secure provision for learners with ALN, and further work is required to strengthen the partnership with Swansea Bay Health Board as a key delivery partner. Assessments. Assessments have been secured to extend our ability to assess a wider range of needs. So it includes assessing adults up to 25. Accredited assessment training and materials have been provided to schools to ensure that they have the resources and expertise to identify and plan for a wider range of needs within their schools. So this one enables Elencos to undertake assessments to identify need within their schools. Significant resources have been secured for learners to support sensory and communication needs. Conclusions. So despite the challenges faced over the couple of years, there has been significant change and progress to ensure readiness for the ALNet reform. The team have led on key project developments as well as continued with business as usual of managing the SEN legislation whilst preparing and delivering the new ALN framework. Extensive professional learning opportunities are provided for schools as well as early years and FEI settings, and awareness raising sessions have also been provided. Collaboration and multi-agency working has improved, and engagement has generally been enhanced by the use of the online platforms. There have been significant challenges for the local health board as a result of the pandemic, which has impacted on the readiness for implementation. However, there is an appetite to work collaboratively to develop that shared vision and principles for joint working in the future. And we have started to have some joint workshops to try and develop that progress on that vision. And that's me. I'll open to questions.
You're on mute, Lyndon.
I was just what I had said, and I'll say it again. Thank you, Alison. It's a really important area, and it's important that we get it right. And thank you for that really thorough report. I have two hands up, and Robert, and then Helen.
Yeah, just want to thank Alison for such a comprehensive report. You know, this is a very wide-ranging reform, the biggest shake-up of this area of policies for nearly 20 years. And I have to be honest with you, I had my doubts about implementing this so quickly and under the circumstances of the last that we've had in the last 2 years. And I think it's a tribute to our staff that they've been able to move towards a different way of working, a system that is very different. It requires so many different organisations to work together in ways that they haven't done before. Looking at the best practice across Wales and expecting that to be standardised, I think that is what this is all about. She referred to individual projects there. Yes, and within those there are several different work streams, and the work that's gone into that is really phenomenal, and it's a credit to our staff that they've been able to take this forward the way they have. So congratulations to Alison and the team, and hope very much to see this developing in future.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Robert. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo the Cabinet members' words, really, it's an inordinate amount of work during the last 2 years and during a pandemic as well. And I guess the proof of the pudding is the difference it makes to children and their families, and the child-centred approach, moving away from a process-led, paper-based approach in Swansea and to a far more streamlined and child-centred system really can only be good for children and young people in Swansea. So I'd like to congratulate the team as well, and Kate as new Head of Service for Vulnerable Learners, and Alison as the Manager for Additional Learning Needs and Inclusion team in Swansea. It's been one big journey, Alison, but really it's been very fruitful. Well done.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions, anyone at all? Only thing I would ask, if I may, what would you say is the biggest challenge moving forward?
I think that the biggest challenge moving forward is the managing of expectations as well. I think, and working together to develop a sustainable model. I think that, you know, the different services working together will undoubtedly bring its challenges, and I think that just having that clear approach and vision, shared vision between the two, and more services will smooth out any issues in the future. I think that, but that one is that's the main one, I think. And I suppose with the increased age range to 25, it's about managing the expectation of that, because I think it's been packaged as an entitlement. I think that there's an understanding from parents that there's an entitlement to learning provision up to the age of 25, but that isn't actually correct. It's in terms of where the trajectory of the learner is heading. It's all very much about an individual bespoke package and trajectory of where those learners are going, and each case needs to be considered in isolation, really. So I think that, you know, that managing that expectation really is going to be a challenge as well for that older population.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that answer. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Alison. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is education other than school, and Kate is going to lead on this, and you're the new head of Vulnerable Learner Service. So congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
I don't know if Robert wants to come in first, or Helen, or Kate.
I'm happy to make this.
Kick us off, Kate. Yeah.
I think it's Kate. It's you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Just mindful of your full agenda, and I know you've had the report in advance. So if it's okay with the group, I'll just talk through the key highlights of the report, and then I'm happy to take any questions after. Okay, so the purpose of the report really is to give an update on the current position, emerging issues, and our proposals for a way forward. So just really in terms of the background, you'll be aware that in 2016 there was a cabinet report proposing a comprehensive overhaul of our EOTAS provision in Swansea, and we are now nearly 6 years down the line, and a lot of that work has taken place, and our newest provision, Maesteru PIU, has been open for a year, and that's our new build in Cocket. And so in terms of where we are currently, we have EOTAS provision, which includes Maesteru PIU, independent special schools, both within Swansea and out of county. We have a home tuition service which deliver a home tuition package for some learners, and Alison's already highlighted our TVEDU provision, which is specialist SEBD provision based at Birch Grove Comprehensive School. As part of our EOTAS strategy as well, we also devolve 700k to secondary schools to focus on developing their own specialist provision for their Key Stage 4 learners. And the purpose of that is really to enable as many learners as possible to retain their place within a mainstream setting during that really critical time in their education. So our largest provision is Maesteru, and we have 158 places currently available. In terms of home tuition, that caseload obviously has got a degree of flexibility, but we have around 67 pupils at the moment. Primarily that service is for pupils who are too ill to attend school, and that may often be at the moment because of emotional health and well-being, due partly to the pandemic and partly to just an increase generally. I've talked around TVEDU, which is specialist provision for children with social, emotional, behavioural difficulties. and our independent special schools, which offer a very good provision, but we also believe that we have really high quality provision within Swansea, and we would really like to develop that provision further and make sure that wherever possible we can offer children a local offer of education within their own communities. We recognise that won't always be possible, but it's something that's really important to us because we believe in terms of being truly inclusive, that should be an opportunity that's available to all. In relation to Maestero, that provision hasn't currently reached its capacity, but it does provide provision for children who have been permanently excluded or who may be what we refer to as dual registered. So they spend part of their time, their registration status is with a mainstream school, but they spend a period of time in Maestero with the view to being reintegrated into their mainstream provision. And a PRU is established in line with the Welsh Government expectations that children and young people will develop skills and abilities to be able to reintegrate. Part of the challenge that we have is because of the effectiveness of our early intervention and prevention services, the reintegration principle is quite difficult because we've set up a system which allows us to primarily refer those children at the high end of the SEBD spectrum, and what that means is that the potential for reintegration for those children and young people becomes more challenging because often they've already exhausted all the strategies that are available within a mainstream setting, and so the reintegration rate has been lower than we would have hoped it would be. We do have a provision within Maestero that offers called Ticanol, which offers a 50% time in mainstream and 50% in Maestero, and that's quite successful in terms of enabling children and young people to retain a mainstream placement. But we do have some issues currently, and if I just give you the highlights of those. So we think that we need a refinement to the recommendations made to Cabinet in 2016. As I say, you know, nearly over 5 years has passed, and during that time we've recognised that there's a changing need in Swansea. And so if we've got a changing need, we really need to flex our provision accordingly. So as I've said, the effectiveness of prevention and early intervention means that actually our mainstream schools are quite able to support children and young people who may have traditionally required a PRU provision, but we are seeing a greater number of children and young people with long-term SCBD needs and with pupils with autistic spectrum presenting with quite challenging behaviours. So we need to think about how we can use our provision most effectively and develop it to support those children and young people. So we've had lots of discussions, and senior officers and the Cabinet member are committed to delivering improved outcomes, both within Maestero, but also to evaluate the effectiveness of the provision that we have on a continual basis. And that work is taking place at the moment. We need to consider how we can support Maestero as a central provision of the local authority to make sure that we've got the best, most effective and efficient use of that really important resource. But we also need to ensure that our funding that's available for EOTA's provision is targeted at need. And while the majority of funding at the moment is with Maestero, we may need to consider that if there is a change in the need of learners, then we need to think about what kind of alternative, perhaps bespoke multi-agency packages of support we need to develop and how we can dedicate funding towards that. What we've done so far is that we've established a team around the PRU. And that's a really important group that's been established to help us in order to innovate and to evolve the provision in relation to EOTAS. So we're using the recommendations from the 2016 report as the starting point of the direction of travel. What we're doing now is we're looking at the presenting need at the moment, so what our current need is, and we're looking at how we may need to adapt and flex our provision. So the team around the PRU meets fortnightly. It's a cross-council working group, so it's not just education officers. We've got representation from Child and Family Services as well. And we're working on an action plan to address the key issues in order to move forward. As I say, we're very committed to cross-council working, and we've had some extensive support from Child and Family Services, and they're working closely with Maestero at the moment. And we're also looking at how education officers can analyse incidents, for example, leading to exclusions, to consider whether there's anything alternative that we could have done differently or that we can do in the future to improve. We're also undertaking a wholesale review of our specialist teaching facilities, and that's really important because some of the children and young people have very specific needs and quite complex needs. And what we want to do is to support our schools to create as inclusive learning environments as possible. So where it is possible for the needs of learners to be met in a mainstream school, we want to enhance the provision that's available for them. And that would include provision for learners with ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, and also specialist support for children with emotional behavioural difficulties. We do recognise, however, that mainstream schools aren't always able to offer that provision, and the success of TVEDU, which is our specialist provision for SEBD in the secondary sector, has led us to think that it would be beneficial to develop something similar in the primary sector, and we're giving some thought to how best to do that at the moment. So we want to effectively compile all this work together and collate it in order to finalise some proposals and make fresh recommendations to Cabinet. What's really central to it all is what you've heard from Alison, really, and indeed from Pam, is that in Swansea we have a whole school approach to promoting inclusion, and we want for all of our schools to demonstrate innovative approaches in supporting children and young people with social, emotional, behavioural difficulties in the same way as they do for children with additional learning needs and for our asylum seeker refugee families and so on. So, you know, we recognise that although there's a national spike in exclusions and they are increasing, we recognise there's still going to be some specific provision required for children and young people that will be more bespoke. So, you know, we've got good offers of EOTAS provision in Swansea. Maestero is central to that. However, we need to always be reflective, to review and adapt and improve if needed. And at the moment, we consider ourselves to be in a period of review.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate, for that report. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Again, I'd like to thank Kate for the presentation this afternoon. You know, what I think we have to recognise is that there were very firm foundations set in the 2016 Cabinet report. What we're doing now is building on those foundations. Needs are forever changing, and it's been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we know about the issues that has generated. But you know, we will recognise as well that needs are constantly changing, and we can't have a set provision that's cast in stone. There needs to be flexibility, there needs to be different ways of working, and I think what we are working through now will offer a way of responding to those changing needs as they evolve. So I do look forward to seeing what the outcomes of this and moving things forward in due course, Chair. As I said earlier, unfortunately, I have to leave for another meeting, but again, you know, the work that Kate is leading and the team with her is outstanding, and I think it's a credit to the council.
Great, thank you, Robert, and totally understand you've got to go, so you can escape. But any questions from anyone else? Well, thank you, Kate. And as I say, it is important that when you've got a service that you can actually, you know, you show flexibility in that service, and that it will change over the years. If it didn't do, we wouldn't be doing our job properly, really. If we were sticking to the original sort of lines that were drawn up, you know, albeit in 2016, it's quite a few years ago now. But so thank you very much indeed. If there aren't any other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Great, excellent. The next item on the agenda, number 9, we're going through it a pace, and that is an update on the new curriculum. And welcome to Damien.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll do similarly with Kate. You've had the report in the pack, so I'll give elaborations or headline information as we go through. So with regard to background, you'll be aware that comprehensive schools have the option of implementing the curriculum in 2023. So Welsh Government have requested that secondary schools confirm their intentions by the beginning of April. And we, as a local authority, we've asked that me, as it happens, are CC'd into their replies. So we're aware of their intentions. We've had 4 back so far from our comprehensive schools indicating that they will be implementing the curriculum for Wales in September 2022. The Welsh Government want to better organise their resources that support schools and their professional learning offer. They believe there's a lot of resources available, which is true, but they don't believe schools know what is available and where is best to find it. So that's something they would like to refine and streamline in the coming months. And still, you know, given the background, Estyn highlighted in a report in July 2021 and again in January with regard to schools' preparation for preparing for the curriculum for Wales. Where it's working well, they recognise the importance of school-to-school collaboration to develop a shared understanding of progression, and that's a term you'll see featured strongly in the recently issued assessment guidance, which is touched upon later in the report again. So going into the briefing or the main body of the report, in terms of implementing curriculum for Wales, the reference is made there to an online event that the Minister for Education held in February, just before half term. And in that event, he talked about ensuring the progression and making assessment arrangements and implementing curriculum for Wales, that Welsh Government believe the necessary experience and expertise exists in Wales, and we need to build on the good practice that is already in place. And his message to schools who feel they're not ready was, it's not too late. You're not alone. The support is there. It's available on Hub. It's available through your region and, of course, through your local authority. He went on to talk about a national professional learning entitlement. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, Welsh Government intend to make the professional learning offer easier to navigate. They believe there's too much variation, and there'll be a core offer of professional learning for all school-based staff, but there'll be additional professional learning that suits different practitioners' needs, and more details will come out in the summer, but the expectation is that that will be available from September. The Minister also referred to the creation of a new company that will make bilingual resources. It's yet to be, this company's yet to be created, but that's on the horizon in terms of supporting our schools as well. And another resource that schools can access is the national networks. This is a sort of a professional where professionals can gather, talk about issues such as progression, talk about curriculum design, and that will become a permanent feature. And that's echoed in our several networks that we have in Swansea, which I know I've referred to before when I've spoken to Scrutiny, such as Scrutiny and the Continuity of Learning Partnership. There's also talk pedagogy networks. And if anything, it can be a little bit of a task to keep up with all the different networks and to communicate the work of the networks with practitioners. This is a conversation I've had just this week with head teachers. But perhaps that will become clearer when the professional learning offer is refined. We're still waiting for the school improvement guidance to be published. It was out in consultation well over a year ago now. But again, we're told it'll be out in the summer term, and it makes clear that evaluation and improvement work is to be separate from accountability, and assessment is also to be separate from accountability. And back in 2015, the Successful Futures publication that actually talked about when assessment isn't separate from accountability, it can actually be quite damaging. And I think it's those sorts of drivers that Welsh Government certainly want to move away from. Also talked about school improvement resources being available to all practitioners, regardless of where you are in Wales. So you wouldn't just have access to partner areas, school improvement resources, if you're in Swansea, Pembroke or Carmarthen. You could access what they have perhaps in Central South or EAS or in Gwe. So I'm not sure how they're going to arrange that, but these school improvement resources will be available to all. And again, to touch on the shared understanding of progression, Assessment and progression is an area school leaders have indicated they want more support and guidance from Welsh Government. So Welsh Government will facilitate workshops that they're calling Assessing for the Future. They'll be available in the coming months, and we're working closely with colleagues in Partneriaeth on their professional learning offer, which focuses on developing that shared understanding of progression. And I was in Carmarthen all day yesterday working on that, and again we had a meeting this morning with colleagues from Partneriaeth and head teacher and senior leader colleagues from Swansea. There's new guidance, statutory guidance issued in January with regard to assessment, and it tells schools how they need to be communicating, how often they need to be communicating with parents, what that communication needs to entail. But to be fair to Swansea schools, I don't think they'll see a huge shift from the current practice. So in terms of reporting to parents and carers each term, the method of communication can be done in a variety of ways. And what the content of that communication includes, I don't think it's a massive shift for most of our schools in terms of their expectations or the expectations of them. RVE and RSE, well, RVE, our RVE lead, Jennifer Harding-Richards, she's been working really hard on supporting schools. The RVE guidance has come out, but it doesn't give an agreed syllabus. So there's work on the horizon with SACRA on agreeing the syllabus. There's professional learning training that Jennifer has already advertised, and there's already a good take-up with those sessions, and we're getting good feedback from colleagues who are attending the sessions. And similarly, we had a session with Lat Blaylock earlier in the term, and that was attended with 60 colleagues from primary and 37 colleagues from the secondary sector. And I should have said it earlier when Pam was with us, but Pam's team's funding helped support that, so that there was no cost to schools. And Alison alluded to the close working between the school improvement team and the ALNIT, the ALN team as well. And that's reflected in this collaborative working that all our practitioners benefit from. With regard to RSE, you'll know that Swansea was chosen for a pilot, and the trial was a good opportunity for some schools to get started on the RSE journey, and we hope that those schools will be in a position to support others, so that school-to-school support and sharing of effective practice as they start their journey in September. And again, there's professional learning sessions that we have in the pipeline for colleagues, which are being subscribed to. But also, I think as soon as next week, a working group has been put together to work on developing RSE policy for colleagues. This is to save, we've got 94 schools and settings in Swansea. It's to save 94 head teachers and senior teams having to go away and work on this from the very beginning. They'll have a skeleton that they can adopt and adapt, and which will save them a lot of work, but has had a lot of input from our team and from the relevant stakeholders from across Swansea, as you can see in the report. And then I've already spoken about assessment and progression, but just to talk to you about the qualifications Wales and their decisions. There's concern that if the qualifications don't support or align with the principles of Curriculum for Wales, it could undermine its implementation. But in that online event that I spoke to you about just a few moments ago, the Minister said, if you are preparing to implement Curriculum for Wales, you are preparing for the new qualifications. And you can see from the report the raft of decisions and new qualifications that will be created for our children and young people in Wales. So the next steps with regard to qualifications is Welsh Government will work with professionals and exam boards to create the best new qualifications for Wales. The development will take time, and Qualifications Wales will need to prioritise where to focus first and which ones will be available from September 2025. I don't have any more information on that for you at the moment. They're currently engaging with professionals and others to create the qualifications, but then we'll go out to consultation and ask for views. So it's important that we keep alert to those consultations when they come out and engage with our colleagues in schools so that our views are fed into the consultation. And then they'll develop and approve the qualifications after consultation, and then from September 2024 prepare to teach them and actually begin teaching in 2025 for those new qualifications. In the conclusions then, it would be good to have more clarity on what is available in terms of support, resources and professional learning for schools and local authority officers and school improvement officers. And with regard to our support of schools, schools still have the pressures of preparing for ALNet. You heard from Alison, obviously, just a few moments ago. Of course, we're not yet out of the pandemic, so there's still COVID-related and pandemic-related pressures that schools are grappling with. But it is a chance for us to support our school leaders and promote a phrase that I've heard recently, post-traumatic growth, which can be done through supervision and close support, coaching, counselling, therapy if needs be, and to support our leaders. I mentioned to you earlier about Estin's report saying where it was working well in terms of sharing that understanding of progression, but a barrier that they felt was that school leaders don't often get the time to think strategically, and that's something that we as a local authority need to consider how we can facilitate, is how can we give our school leaders time to think strategically. And that's it from me with regard to the headlines from the report.
Thank you very much. Actually, are there any? So can I ask anybody who's not speaking? I think it's Steve. You've got you're not muted. We're getting a bit of background. Yeah, thanks. Dang it, I'm sure there'll be a few questions, and I've got a few. Any questions from anybody? No hands up. Can I come in with a few then? It's obviously key we get this right, because the new curriculum affects everybody, and if we get it wrong, the pupils in schools will be disadvantaged, and will be disadvantaged against people in England and Scotland and so on. Are there any schools that are struggling in Swansea to cope with the new curriculum?
I think not everyone is at the same point of the journey, if you like, and there's guidance from Welsh Government with regard to journey to 2022 and at what phase schools might be at, and that's what the school improvement team the conversations they're having when they go in to talk to school leaders is about where they feel they are. What are the processes that have they gone through thus far, who they've engaged with, and yet some are further down the line, but there's a strong ethos. There always has been in Swansea, and I say this as a recent Swansea head teacher, of school to school support of one another, of collaborating with the local authority. So I wouldn't say there are schools struggling, as in miles away, but there are schools that need more support than others, and we've identified those schools. I believe it's fair to say through our engagement visits, and professional learning opportunities have been arranged and facilitated for those schools to engage with. So there was a group, for instance, of 5 or 6 schools that worked with my colleague Sarah Lloyden and colleagues from Partneriaeth, and they've worked on developing their vision for the curriculum, because that's a sort of collectively agreed that that's where you need to start, is agreeing your vision. And I've had really positive feedback from Sarah, but it's only through visiting and speaking to engaging with our schools that we know about what schools need support. And what we are developing, I'd like to think, and what we need to develop further, is a culture where our school leaders are as comfortable telling us about where they need support and what they're not as good at, as they are at telling us about what they are good at and where they're strong. So it's developing that culture. But I genuinely think that, to be fair to Welsh Government, to be fair local authority in the region, they understand that the wrong things have been driving the system, and that the accountability system, the high stakes, and there's been a shift from that. So it'll take time, it can't change overnight, but as I say, we're developing those, building on the strong relationships we've got with our schools and working closely, collaborating with our school leaders. Sorry, Chair, you're on mute.
On the point that you know, obviously some schools are a little further behind. Are they going to be taking part from September 22, or are they going to be doing that further down the line?
Well, primary schools will be implemented from September 22 in whatever iteration they have in place for their school. And you know, as to go back to the report, Welsh Government recognise it's an iterative process. So what it looks like in September 22, it might well not look like in September 2023. If I take, you know, my former school, Nails, you know, do things evolve? That's the nature of school improvement. So primary schools will be implementing it from 2022. That's not up for option or debate. Secondary schools, as I mentioned to you, we've had 4 indicate that they intend to implement it from September 2022. Others might well want to wait to see how things work out with regard to relationships and sexuality education, for instance, and more of the guidance where they would feel more comfortable trialing, if you like, going through another phase of trialing, more planning, more action research, more engagement with their stakeholders. So it's been a little bit mixed bag with our secondary schools, and yet those who don't feel they're ready, it's not a punitive process. If they don't feel they're ready, then Welsh Government are giving them that breathing room to have another academic year to get themselves as ready as possible. And then, as I say, others feel that they're ready to go for September, and I'd imagine, you know, they've been working in close collaboration with their partner primaries. That's not to say that those who won't implement in September haven't been, but through various circumstances, often bespoke to the school, that dictates how ready they are.
It's a bit of a worry though, and is it not in September 22 in the primary sector that, ready or not, we're going ahead, and some of them may not be ready, and that would disadvantage those children, surely. Yeah,
I think for primary schools, the curriculum for Wales isn't as big a departure from their ways of working. So I think more, and Estin have recognised this themselves through their own reports, that the primary schools are in a more ready state, if you like, to implement the curriculum, but because it's almost like a natural evolution for the primaries and the way they have worked over years and years. So there's probably, as I say, primary schools who have they're deepening their understanding of child development, perhaps, and progression, whereas others are still concentrating on, you know, what the curriculum design looks like. But Welsh Government recognise there will be variation, and that will be then the role of us as a local authority in terms of the officers and quite rightly you as members asking these questions to make sure that we are cognizant of what's going on in our schools and where the support is needed, and then brokering that support either from schools within Swansea, schools within the region, or professional learning offer from Partneriaeth and beyond.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. I am concerned that you know, because we get an element of some schools struggling, some are not. Some, you know, schools going in September 22, ready or not. And it's a bit, I have to say, one thing we've got to remember is that pupils in Swansea will be going to university or trying to get to university in other parts of the UK, not just in Wales. And they could well be disadvantaged in the interim period while we're getting this right. So it's a bit of a dog's breakfast, to be honest. And I think it's a real worry. And I think I mentioned this a couple of years ago when we talked about this, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that, you know, getting all the schools up to speed and everything. And here we are, you know, really it's imminent, and it is what I thought it might be. Not, you know, in some cases well, but in other cases not so good. And that is a worry. But thank you for, you know, you're frank, and I think you're absolutely right in the sense that the ethos should be that if you've got a problem in the school, then please get in touch. And I know that that is the ethos that you were developing, and it's absolutely right for it to happen. Helen, you've got your hand up. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the being further forward or further behind, that the language we use is critical, isn't it? But the key thing in terms of common ground on this, to make sure the schools are as sufficiently ready as required, is that Estyn have produced a roadmap that's been in existence for some years. In Swansea, we've developed a curriculum implementation plan that predates the national plan for the journey to 2022. So our implementation plan ran from 19 to 2022, so it's a 3-year plan. And also latterly and recently, Welsh Government have produced their own guidance really on the key components to that being sufficiently ready. And it's really pleasing to see at national level this consolidation really of resources in one place, because you will have heard as scrutiny panelists or indeed policy development committee members that obviously there's been a lot of concern really about pioneer schools, and some being in the know and others not being in the know. And obviously by the virtue of the fact that they were pioneer schools, they were further forward right at the start of this journey. So I think what we're seeing recently is this far more national approach to bring schools to the right level of readiness. And that's very welcome, especially in light of the pandemic, because obviously that pandemic has not allowed schools to develop as much as they would like, because they've had to maintain safe environments and meet the basic needs of children in our schools across Swansea. So this national consolidation of resources, bringing schools all onto one page, is very much welcome. And inevitably there will be some schools further forward on the journey in Swansea, and we welcome the support they give to other schools as well. That's really important to note.
Great, thank you very much, Helen. And any other questions at all? Well, can I thank Damien as well, and for the work that you're doing. And it's a difficult task, and you know, thank you very much, and Helen and the team for what you're doing in getting the schools to readiness. The next item on the agenda is the end of year report. And there we are, there's Michelle coming in at almost the right time. Has anybody got any comments? We've seemed to have looked at quite a few areas during the course of the year. And I don't need to read them out because you can see them yourself on your papers. But does anybody got any comments?
Lyndon, I was wondering if I could just go through it a little bit, very, very briefly.
Yeah, sure.
There's just a couple of things to highlight. First is just some idea of how you thought that things have gone this year, which is in 1.3. The other thing is just very briefly, just to let you know that you've had 10 meetings, you've had 8 conveners letters with responses, and your council attendance has been 80%, which is very good. So really, it's just some of the points that you might want to consider, just very briefly, is, you know, what has gone well this year. I think we've done it last year as well, didn't we? What's not gone so well? Did the panel work focus on the right things? And what have you learned that might improve future scrutiny? So they're just 4 points really to consider, and if you've got anything to feed into that to help improve for next year.
I think one of the things we were able to do in previous years, not for the last couple, but we were able to get out into schools more and see them in their own environment. And unfortunately, recently, over the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do that properly, really. And I think that's been a bit of a loss for us, because I always remember a number of us going to Pendrahavet School, and gosh, it was good. Really interesting, because we could see exactly what they were doing, and Dylan Thomas and so on, but we haven't been able to do that. So I think that's been one of the things we had to suffer because of the pandemic, and I think that's something that obviously is starting to open up again now, and we were able to do it. Any comments from anyone though?
Got any thoughts about what might have gone well, or any sort of areas for improvement, really?
Sue.
Just really a tribute to the schools, the way that they've dealt in the last 2 years for the pandemic, and all the changes that they've had to deal with, be it ALN, the new curriculum. I think they've all done a magnificent job. Our children have been as safe as they possibly can be within the school situation. It's been a horrendous time for them.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Yeah, any other comments? I'd agree with that. They were, gosh, and they were learning on the hoof is the other thing. As in fact, looking at Helen on the screen there, so was Helen and her team. And it's something that you were having to learn day by day. There wasn't a book that you could have learned about that a couple of years ago. You were literally picking it up day by day, and as new variants were coming in, different rules were coming in, it's been a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, no, absolutely. Linda, Tyler Lloyd, that is, yeah. You're muted.
Yeah, no, I'm just
there we go.
No, I just want to say that I think that the schools have been paddling like mad under the water. I know that Mayo School, I know what good work has been done there. I know how hard the staff have worked. I know how the new headmaster has had to try and get an extra staff when all the teachers went down with COVID. I also know that Damien Beach had been in helping a head teacher in another school when she was struck with, what am I going to do? So I just know that the support has been there, and I don't think, I know that it hasn't been the best experience for pupils, but I do know that they have all been supported by the excellent staff in County Hall and the teaching staff. So I think that you've done a grand job, during this last pandemic. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, indeed. Good. Any other comments? I agree, as I say, with that as well. And as I say, the whole of the teaching staff have done a tremendous job, and Helen and her team as well. Because as I say, learning on the hoof, not easy. We didn't know what was around the corner, really, at any of these stages. So I think we've done, in that sense, the schools have done a really, good job, and they deserve our congratulations for sticking at it over the last couple of years and getting us to where we are. Right, are there any other comments on that? Otherwise, I would like to say no comments. Only like to say it's been a real privilege to chair the committee over the last couple of was it 3, maybe 4 years? I can't remember now, but over the last number of years, and it's been a real privilege. And hopefully we've helped to make a difference and make a positive difference as well. So thank you all very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Or some of us are off to another meeting in about 17 minutes. So time to have a brew. Thank you all very much indeed, though.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Ellen. Bye.
Bye.